see you. Good to catch up after Prague. Last time we saw each other, right?
Yeah, and which was a great. We had a session up there for people on like helping companies actually with their marketing. Which, God forbid, we talk marketing in a
Yeah, yeah,
blockchain
yeah.
conference, but it was great.
No, no, it was really good to hang out and good to connect. And like, for context for everyone, Stella very kindly hosted me to talk about AI and marketing, and Jordan and I connected through a shared love of gaming. You used to be involved in FIFA and Sims, so I can probably blame my parents can probably blame you for my bad grades at school from playing Sims all day.
Yeah, I did. I spent 15 years working in games, and I grew up on gaming. When I started working on Madden football, American football was about as close to a dream gig as I could come up with. And so I kind of fell into marketing as a career, kind of by accident coming out of university. But then, yeah, I spent time in games, working on lots of different big games, small games, console. Then I did a bunch of time, 4 years on mobile gaming, which was a whole nother thing. And but yeah, working in the gaming industry was terrific, and it's a really dynamic industry with its own pros and cons. But yeah, fun to work on big franchises, and but also launch new ones, some of which stick and some of which don't, much like life in crypto. So,
Amazing.
Jordan,
We
I'd
can
love to
get
hear a
back to
bit
that.
more about the gaming experience. Were you more on user acquisition? It sounds like you did mobile, desktop, console, and
yeah,
also
so
product marketing,
yeah,
retention.
I started. So my roots are in product marketing, and I started my first job in gaming was product marketing manager on Madden NFL football, the pro football, and I always one of the things that really was fundamental working in games, which frankly has translated over into my time in blockchain, is I was always based in the development studios where the games were made, right? So when I started working, Electronic Arts as a company, big, huge companies, headquartered out in Redwood City, California. But my first job was in Orlando, working in the studio where it was filled with people literally making the product. And that's kind of my foundation for marketing has always been kind of that connection to product. And then over time started picking up then responsibility for becoming a little bit more of a generalist. And then in mobile games, I mean, Emily, your point on user acquisition is the right one, right? Where it's like, I was working in free to play mobile, right? So you're spending money to acquire a user and they're not buying a game, right? You can download a game for free. And so like it really introduced this idea of rigorous understanding and analysis on like user acquisition and what's the lifetime value of this person that we're spending the money on, and you're spending the money up front, right? You pay, $2, $10, $15, $50 to get a user, and all they've done at their first step is download the game. They haven't even opened it. And so that is kind of a little bit of a terrifying proposition around versus like a console, you buy a PlayStation game, they come in, they buy the game, you get $50, $60. And then there's downloadable content that's sold after the fact. And so the shift from console to mobile for me was a really interesting one and a really different mindset of like this kind of growth marketing user, lifetime value over cost per install, formula thing, along with, hey, but brand still matters or community still matters. Like it's not that at the expense of everything else. And there was always kind of this pendulum swing between kind of like analytical growth marketing, stickiness versus like, hey, we're trying to build a brand. It's a game, right? Like how do you sort of balance that for those two things? And the shift from kind of traditional packaged goods games for like EA Sports and The Sims to more of like pure live service marketing, which for essentially a free to play game that was a big pivot for me, but a really like the learning was awesome.
And it's super relevant today, right? Because Jay Key on X, or Justin, head of Safari, he's often talked about the pendulum swinging from in crypto right now, all everyone talks about is mindshare, right? And that's like people are paying for active, not active users, but active attention.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of cost of user acquisition on the very face level. And then a lot of DeFi protocols are saying like, well, okay, what is the LTV? How much are people going to spend? Because it's like freemium games, 20%, if that, of all users contribute 80% of the revenue. And I think the numbers are even more crazy in crypto, right? But I've just realized I was so excited to jump in. I haven't actually introduced you. I know that most people probably know who you are. So give me 1 second. I wanted to just do this. So can you guys see? Can everyone see my screen? Wonderful. Okay, cool. So we are going to be interviewing Jordan, who is the CMO of Stellar Foundation. Okay, give him a follow on X, and he's going to have a lot to tell us, I think, now and also in the next months to come, because it's important that while everyone's talking about mindshare and all these kind of things, like we're talking about pre-TGE, like what does it actually take to run something and build it and be Lindy, like be around for 10 years? Because there's a graveyard of projects, right? And Stellar has just continued and has stayed relevant as well. So I've made like a little, this was around the time about going to Prague, just kind of learning more about Stellar, and we can dig into it in a second. But yeah, just wanted to introduce you formally and also say thank you very much to Emily and Reka for joining us as well. Emily, CMO of Hype, and Reka, who's joining a new ZK team very soon, or already has done. Awesome. Nice. Cool. So yeah, so Jordan, tell us how you started at Stellar. What was your first experience?
Yeah, the way all the things I talked about for games and the time I spent in games, I really enjoyed it. And then I reached a point where I got sick of working on games. And when that happens, it's time to go do something else. Right? And so, and so I was poking around, I'd done a little bit of consulting for a former founder that I'd worked with, who was getting into blockchain, just started learning about it in 2018, 2019. And I got hooked up with Danelle Dixon, who's the CEO and executive director of the Stellar Development Foundation, and Jed McCaleb, who's the founder. And they really were like, hey, marketing here right now is community, and we want to start to do more than that. And so I think for me, the appeal of, there were some parallels in terms of what I thought I could translate from gaming. Like I said, like living with development, being product centric, having really rabid communities. That's definitely a parallel between gaming and blockchain and crypto, for better and for worse. But I was ready for a new challenge and a new space and new tech and all that. And so when I joined in 2019, there were a couple of us, and it was really, that time was crazy. It was there just was not, the space was still figuring out what it was in its infancy around figuring out what it wanted to be. And that was exciting to start to talk about what it could be while it was still, the cliche of we're flying the plane while we're building it. I mean, the whole space was kind of like that in that 20, in even the 2018, 2019, 2020 period. And so this kind of like super dynamic industry, marketing hadn't really kind of started there. Like that challenge for me, having come from a much more established industry where there's playbooks around games and game launches and mobile games and live service, like that kind of greenfield was slightly terrifying, but really was like, I went for the intellectual challenge.
Mm-hmm. It's a big challenge, right? Go on, Emily, sorry.
I'd love to riff off that a little bit, because game marketing and app marketing is so different than blockchain marketing. And I'm sure we'll dive a bit more deeper later in this stream. But how do you measure success? Because with mobile apps, you have a very clear LTV, which then you have CAC and CPAs, and then you have the retention metrics. how do you measure success? And how was that transition going from gaming and Web2 over to being a CMO at one of the biggest blockchain companies?
Yeah, I mean, the success measurement is that you're right to raise the point, Emily, particularly coming from mobile games where like success is a daily thing, right? Like, did we get the people at the price we wanted? Are they the types of players that we wanted? That, you know, and the level of analytical rigor on live service or mobile games is extraordinarily high. And, you know, for when I started at SDF, you know, there was the macro goal of just kind of growing the ecosystem, but like, okay, what does that really mean? And you know, for us, what good like even back in 2019, let alone now, it was kind of the beginnings of like starting to just onboard company. Like, we want just more people building on Stellar, right? But it was more, I think, sort of kind of entrepreneur and enterprise focused versus we want to build a developer community, and which we'll get into a little bit more, has become in particular a focus for us over the last couple of years. But it was really around like, okay, like partnership deals. How many, like, are we bringing in big ones? Are there ones that we can talk about? Are they getting real? And when I started at Stellar in particular, we were laser focused, and that's been true from its origin, from when the network started, focused on blockchain and payments. And so it was really laser focused on that. And what was, and so we started our work around driving the payments, trying to drive payment, like getting companies building payment solutions on Stellar. You know, now I think, frankly, we are much more metric. You know, we brought a lot more metric focus to our business, right? You know, particularly when we launched smart contracts last year, like, it's like, okay, look, this is really going to be a linchpin for us to bring new developers into the ecosystem. And so, like, then developer acquisition really has also, you know, become a focus. I mean, not to go too tangential, I mean, what the hardest part, I think, for myself and my team, and I think this is true for all kind of L1 marketing teams, is like the range of audiences that we have to reach and talk to is like crazy, right? And so it is by far the hardest part of the job.
On that note,
please,
could you speak on what the breakdown or ratio is of focus to a super crypto native target audience versus going towards more institutions or more mainstream media, and how that breaks down percentage wise in your marketing?
Yeah, it is. I don't know if I could get to percentages, but I mean, the way that I promise I'll answer that question. But the way that, just to give people sort of a comp of understanding, right? So like marketing a video game, like there are people probably like Jen when he was a kid who care about a new video game like a year before it comes out, right? I had the ball going down, my left wing had the ball and he moved this way, but the defender should have gone that way, and the AI in defense in FIFA is broken and you guys have to fix it. It's terrible, right? Like 12 months we're getting feedback on message boards, right? Before even the new game has come out. And then at the same time, there are people who care about a game 4 months after it's come out, right? I just got a PlayStation. I got my new PlayStation for Christmas. What game should I get? Right. And so video game marketing has to sort of appeal to those, like the fanatic 12 months before and the more casual 4 months after. But they're all there for the same reason, right? Like they're all here like, look, I'm here to have fun. It's a video game. I want authenticity and social play, blah, blah. And so how you market to that range, you can have different things that you talk about to those two different audiences. But how you market to that range of people and everyone in between is, you can be relatively consistent. And in blockchain, particularly for L1s, right, you've got crypto natives, you've got developers and entrepreneurs, you have enterprises. We care about policy and regulators. Like they not only care about really different things, sometimes the things they care about are like diametrically opposed, right? What a regulator and policy person cares about when you're talking about blockchain can literally be the polar opposite to like a crypto native. Like, how is this going to help the the financial system versus how do we overthrow the financial system, right? Like,
Yeah.
right? Like, and you're like, hey, everybody, right?
Yeah,
And so, like, that is by far the hardest part of the job. And Reka, the answer to your, I mean, from a percentage basis, there are teams within Stellar. We have like a partnerships BD team that is more on like the enterprise side. We've got folks who are focused on more like bringing in new DeFi, like crypto native company builders. We've got an ecosystem team and a community team and a, how to like with the community funding, and like we've got all those things. And marketing has to serve all those different needs. And so, I mean, other than saying we try to divide up our time equally, and some, and we grapple with like, we're trying to do a lot of things. Are we doing a lot of things pretty well, or are we doing a few things like really well? And that is a real balance, right?
I think that's one thing that came through in when I was reading up about Stellar and when we were in Prague, is like looking at Franklin Templeton wisdom tree, because I think one thing that people who are watching this stream may not realize is like the sheer scale of Stellar, because everything we hear about nowadays is like, hey, we're launching a token soon, and like no one's thinking about the regulation, the policy, like what it takes to be around for 10 years. And I think what Stellar's done is like, you've got the liquidity, that's the thing that comes first. Everyone's fighting for attention right now, but it's only been like things like Berachain and with Royco and maybe Movement that have like realized that, oh, we actually need to pre-seed with liquidity, because everything follows liquidity. It's like the classic blockchain trilemma, right? Like developers, users, people building, and ecosystems and partnerships, right? Like which one do you go for first? And I think what's happening in 2025 is everyone's like, user. I need to get like attention because that's what drives a TGE. I suppose one good question we had was, I guess it's a tough one because it's asking kind of the past and the future. Like how would Stellar be positioned if it was launched in 2025 or 2024?
Yeah, I mean, I think during my time and before when I started, how Stellar's positioning has definitely evolved, right? So when I started, there are people, I've seen the phrase used in other marketing around money should move like email, right? This idea of just, and that's true, and it's how we think about our business. And when I started, that was the line on Stellar's Twitter profile, was money should move like email. And I think now where we kind of repositioned, and we did like a brand refresh and some repositioning work about a year and a half ago, and it really is anchored on like utility, right? This idea of like where blockchain, the line rather than is now where blockchain meets the real world, right? Which is like, hey, like you can use blockchain for a lot of different things. Where can blockchain do things better? And why is Stellar well positioned to do that? And like that focus of, and that utility can be either sort of around the narrative for blockchain, blockchain is going to save the world, but also just like there is financial growth opportunity by doing things differently and disrupting how things work or improving how things work. And it's broader than payments, which is why we added smart contracts, because like we saw like, oh, the DeFi is like a thing, and we need like for us to achieve like our mission, that our foundation has a mission around growing financial access, and offering DeFi beyond just payments to like more everyday financial services like savings. That's been a change for us. And so I think particularly now, as the industry sort of has this larger kind of soul searching and fighting the narrative of crypto, it's not good for anything, right? I think for us, the focus on the actual like utility, where can it actually be used to do things better, like that is like we've like anchored there. And I think that if we were starting today, like we wouldn't have launched any. If we were launching tomorrow, we wouldn't launch if we didn't feel like this has to be able to have real world impact in a way that kind of only, like in particular, only blockchain can do.
Jin, I think maybe we should set the stage, and maybe we should share the Figma and go over some of these stats to really set the stage on how impressive the growth of Stellar is. And I'd love to dig, also like do a zoom out, because Jin, I know you just did a fraction of the campaigns and activations Stellar has done in the last 10 years. And you touched on it a little bit, Jordan, about the different audiences. So there's crypto natives, there is institutions, there's also policy, and I believe there is one more that is slipping my mind, developers. And sometimes they also have conflicting desires or influences. So I have a few questions, but maybe let's start with the TLDR, just so everyone is aware about this massive network growth and adoption that Stellar has. I'm seeing some really impressive stats here.
Yeah, I mean, I think so this quarter in review thing, which is that is a bit of a kind of a us doing that. It's like if we were a public company, that's like our quarterly call, and we started that not because we want to be corporate, but because we want to sort of let folks know, like, hey, like here's the progress we've made, right? We're open source foundation, blah, blah. And so actually we've got our next call next week, and we're seeing just growth on usage, on payment volume, on transactions, all while keeping the fees down. There was a whole thread last year on that a press outlet had written about zombie chains, and they used fees as a proxy for activity. And then we had to go talk to them, like, actually, the goal is not high fee volume as an indicator for activity, right? It's like we're trying to keep the fees down, and so which was a kind of interesting narrative point. And I think and so we every quarter we do one of these kind of more. Danelle gets on, we get other folks on there to talk about what's happened over the course of a quarter. I think the one thing, I mean, to see the payment, like things like payment volume and account usage grow is awesome, and that's kind of why we're here. I think the other one, the other metric that we saw at the end of the year was, we were a top. Electric Capital came out with their developer end of year developer report, and Stellar was a top 10 in terms of developer growth, right? And so to have been around for as long as we have and still be able to drive that kind of growth for us, like that, for me, personally, was like, oh yeah, we're doing it, right? Like we're getting, like we added smart contracts. We've had, again, I think a relatively, over the course of my time, relatively incremental new focus in terms of bringing like builders and developers to the platform, and like for us to be in the towards the top of the industry in terms of bringing new people to build on Stellar, like that was a number I was stoked to see.
Just to call out some hard numbers, I'm seeing there's 9 million addresses throughout 2024, and wallet addresses are not always the best metric because you never know if it's a unique user. But specifically on payment volume, I see 1.6 billion just in quarter one of 2024, and also some really major institutional partners. And when I zoom out on this Figma that Jin put together, there's so many different campaigns. I'd like to go back to that topic about having conflicting messaging. Do you also have different positioning that either changes over time or is used when you're targeting different audiences?
Well, I think two things. One, what we strive to do is to try to not, I mean, we will do things, the goal, like, I wouldn't say that we have conflicting messaging. I think what we try to do is, and I think our focus on utility and where blockchain meets the real world as a macro as a macro brand positioning is something that I think can work for our kind of rainbow of different audiences, right? Now, what that what that means for everybody is different, right? What it means for a developer in terms of like, hey, I'm going to build something using smart contracts and it's going to get used, versus going to talk to a regulator and be like, hey, let us show you about how blockchain can be used to dispense humanitarian aid, right, in a more efficient way, or how it's actually helping with financial access and by association financial inclusion, and it actually helps people. It's not just people getting rich, right? And so, but all of those things, they're all anchored on real world examples. Going to talk to, I mean, Franklin Templeton, they started building on Stellar before smart contracts, and it, why they chose Stellar matters, right? Because we've got a unique consensus protocol and how it works, blah, blah. But the fact that they've stayed, and that to me is kind of like, oh, not because we came to see if it could do this, it's actually working and saving us money, right? And Franklin Templeton, look, they probably have like a foundation and a charitable arm. They're not in it to make the world better, right? They're in it to make money, right? And so
shareholder value, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so for them to, it's like, with all the noise and noise is more negative than I mean it. All the momentum around RWAs and all that, it's great. But I think you see companies like Franklin, like these big companies are doing it because there are shares. I mean, shareholder value is exactly the right term, Jen. Like there's value creation that can happen by doing things on blockchain differently. And so, and so now when we will do campaigns, we generally, they are more targeted, right? And so when we launched smart contracts last year, which I can give more context around, but we're late to the smart contract game. And so we launched a campaign around Build Better, right? And that campaign was anchored around substantively what is actually better about our smart contract platform. We're a follower, which means we get to do things, we get to fix problems that have existed in smart contracts forever, right? You go online and you find, if you search for state bloat and smart contracts, right? It's like, right? Well, exactly. Guess what? Like for us being able to come late to the game, we've actually done that in a way and we've solved for that. And so there's things about the actual product, if you use that in quotes, or the tech that actually that then substantiate the Build Better. But then we do a campaign that's targeted really at developers and entrepreneurs around, hey, here's why smart contracts matter. Here's why building it on Stellar, where we focus on these real world use cases. Like if you care about what you're building actually getting used to do stuff, Stellar is a place you can come do that. And so, linking a campaign, having the source of that campaign be anchored in truth is great, right? And that, again, I come from product marketing, and so I've marketed shitty products and I've marketed really good products, and it's always easier.
It's a lot easier with the good one.
Yeah, I mean, you can tap dance your way through something that isn't there. But
it's so relevant because we've got like 100 roll-ups where they kind of like minor distinctions, or like we're slightly faster, or we'd have a different something. But then you make a really interesting point about smart contract structure, right? And even like L1 structure, because when Ethereum came around, like I remember when it was launched, everyone was like, but then we got to a point where there's a global fee market. So when CryptoKitties launched, or whatever's happening, the entire network kind of goes down, which is why we've had these roll-ups. And then Solana came along with local fee markets, which has shown a lot of their success. And like even with Stellar, I mean, the thing that jumped out from this to me is like the most was actually one sentence, which was like, where has it gone? Cash to DeFi capabilities. That lit up to me like a Christmas tree, because the way I see like what's going on in the market right now is we are essentially have like a small pool of essentially like very few players chasing the same liquidity, just like running around trying to be like, hey, look at our incentive program. Hey, look at our little like, oh, we do a cute little thing with a new color. Whereas like there is a huge pool of liquidity, because I think that real world impact, like, to speak frankly, has had a bad name for a long time, I think, because it's associated with, it's not going to make me money. But like, the mission of putting cash into DeFi is going to make a lot of people money. Like,
Yeah.
I'm very excited about that, because we're recycling the same stuff over and over again. And this is the only way to do that, is by partnering with people like Wisdom Tree and Franklin Templeton, and then putting it to good use.
Yeah, I think what you said is exactly right, Jen. And I think for us, like, one of my favorite Sorobon, one of the favorite uses of Sorobon that's happened to date is so we've got a lending protocol in the network called Blend, right? And it, they're
good dudes, met them in Prague.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And what they've done, or what we've seen, and this is kind of our vision for when we went through all the trouble of launching smart contracts, was there's a wallet in Latin America called Meru. It came through the Stellar Community Fund, which is our community funding, our ecosystem project funding program that we have. And what they've done is they've integrated with Blend to allow people to not just add funds to their wallet, but then and hold that asset, which in inflationary economies is, I can hold it in US dollars and blah, 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 but I can also then earn off of it. And that is a core DeFi principle. But what we have on Stellar, and the way cash to DeFi works, is because MoneyGram has integrated with Stellar, a Meru user can walk into a MoneyGram outlet with cash, add it to their wallet, to their Meru wallet, and then put it in DeFi. And so the promise is sort of realized. I mean, that's my favorite. That's what good looks like for us, right? Where it's like, hey, I don't need a bank account in order to earn on my money. And again, MoneyGram, same thing, right? They're owned by, there used to be a public company, now they're owned by a private equity firm, right? So, I mean, they're not doing this. I mean, again, they appreciate the financial access, financial inclusion, but they're in it for the money, right? And so this, I think for them, this idea of on and off ramps, and they see opportunity around that. I mean, for being an old company, they have a very digital forward approach to their business. And so when they took all the time to integrate with Stellar, because that project was a big one for them, and but that's what this enables. And again, this isn't just like we're doing it, or anyone is doing it solely to better the world. I mean, there has to be a business rationale for that. And so, I think utility. I mean, we know that utility is sexy, right? It's like, it's actually going to get used. It's actually blockchain does something better than how it's done now, or it grows the pie. It doesn't just shift the pie slices around. And so I think that's, like, for us, that's kind of what good looks like.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to switch gears back onto Figma and overarching a little bit more strategy and marketing ops. I always bring those practical questions here, and would love to know an organization of this magnitude with this long tail, differentiated positionings and strategies, different target audiences, very clear advancements of what the goals are for the year, for example. I would love to help you say more around how far out can you plan? Because it's a huge trend in crypto, as all of us are marketers here who are talking with you as well, that we really only can see 3-4 months ahead usually, with an exception of a few company-wide goals.
Yeah.
So how is that different in a organization of this size? How far can you plan? How do you think about the structure and the strategy of laying out these campaigns for the quarter? How you help the team operate more efficiently cross-functionally? Because I imagine it's a lot more sizable than what we usually work with.
Yeah, it is really, it's the second hardest thing after the range of audiences. and it's a little bit kind of what I was saying early on around like the dynamicism of Web3 and blockchain is great, and it is like maddening, right? From a planning perspective. And so, what we do is we kind of operate by quarter. We know we are never as far we are never as far ahead as we all wish we were in terms of our planning. It is always, no matter how hard we try, even just talking about it is like it's giving me angst. Like we can't. It's really hard to do. And the only example what I have seen actually from my more corporate times was actually people get so far, like General Mills, like big food company, like it took them forever to move to 18 months, not 12, like we're going to plan the year, we're going to plan 18 months, right? And at Electronic Arts, right, the sports games come out every year. Well, now they start working on next year's version before this year's version is done, right? Because they're just trying to squeeze more time. And we can try and do that, right? We can say like, hey, we see these milestones coming, or these, certainly industry events can be good tent poles for, okay, we know that consensus is here, or, Token 2049 Singapore is there, or our own events. What can we try to marshal and link to that? And it feels like this, right? It is like, but I think to the extent, whenever not to be simplistic, when we have more time, the work is better, and the execution is better. Like we never shortchange our thinking. It's always then we try and cram what would have been ideally taken us 2 months to do into 3 weeks, and that's really hard. And so we have we have probably a larger team, although we go back and forth. Sometimes it feels big and sometimes it feels not big enough, because of the volume of stuff we want to do. And the biggest thing I have found that helps with that is like, hey, we got to say no to some stuff, right? That sucks, and it never, the idea of leaving cool opportunities or things that make business sense on the table, is hard. But my general view is like quality over quantity is you rarely feel like that whenever you do that, you have that short-term pain of prioritization, and then you're like, but you know what, we did that thing really well, and that was right. And we try and do that. So we don't, when we have like a larger campaign that is multi-channel, and it's usually we targeted at maybe 1 or 2 groups, and we have other things we need to do, but we really like we don't do multiple campaigns at a time, right? The scope required for that, like we don't have those kind of resources either. And so I think there's a degree of focus and say, hey, we're going to do this, but it's going to have a bigger impact. It's going to have more legs, right? That's kind of like the guiding principle we try to use. And then your question about sort of the cross-functional collaboration is then it's like, all right, like this is our core idea. We have a process around how we organize around that idea, and kind of giving all, like, whether it's comms and social or digital or events, like, developer marketing or product marketing, like this is what we're anchored around. What's a good way for that to manifest in your function? And then like, let's bring it together and make sure, okay, it has to hang together. Hey, you're doing this, I'm doing that, blah, 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 blah. And so, in that process, it can be messy, but it is, when we do that well, that is our best stuff, right? Just from a like market, and it's when everyone is the most satisfied with the work. We're like, oh, it's integrated, it hangs together, like it's compelling, it's more like it's here, it's there, it's everywhere, like that kind of thing. It is it's hard to do, and we've been banging at it for a while, and I don't think anyone on my team would be like, oh, we're like a well-oiled machine that belts out integrated campaigns. Great. It's hard. It's really hard.
Anyone who says that is never right.
They're
like
never right.
Who says that they're
right?
never right.
I mean, you can point to things that.
Yeah.
But it's a lie. And so I think like particularly in our space, right? There is opportunity everywhere. And so for us, the one thing that I think we are good at, I think we're good at a couple of things, but like one thing that I think we are good at, and it's a challenge in our space, is kind of being careful about not chasing shiny objects, right? And so for us, like if it is not, and that can be hard, right? To be like, oh my gosh, everyone's talking about this thing and we're not talking about it. Right?
It's really nice to know that even at the highest level, you are still getting Telegram or DM messages with like someone else's tweet being like, why are we not doing this?
Totally. I mean, it happens on internal Slack. It happens on a Telegram. I mean, it's like we should go there. We should go here. And it's just like, hey, like, okay, maybe there is a way we could take advantage of that, or we do it in this way, blah, 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 blah. But like, we're really trying to do this thing really, really well.
Yeah.
And
well, that comes to internal storytelling, right, and leadership, because like we've got a wide audience of people, and like even on this call, like we've got different sizes of teams. We're either answering to founders, to leadership, or even founders answering to investors. Like, how do you, in general, like in your experience, build that kind of trust and storytelling to be like, if you want to prioritize something and say, no, we're not going to do this because of this. How do you make sure that decision is trusted, right? That's a really hard thing for everyone.
To add on to that, you said this phrase earlier about business rationale, and it sounds like you only do one campaign a quarter. And so I'm very curious to understand, how do you say no, and how do you go all in that one campaign? And maybe we can even use the Crypto Saves Lives campaign, both to understand the campaign planning, as well as how the execution was done.
Yeah, I'm happy to get into it. I think, Jen, to answer your question initially around internal stakeholders, I mean, it is, look, I say everyone who works in marketing, and you guys know this, one of the hard things about working in marketing is there is no other function in business that gets more free feedback, right? Like everyone has feedback on marketing, right? Now, like I don't code, so like I'm not going to go give feedback to our core engineering team on what the blah blah. But like, I get lots of free feedback and ideas on things we should go do or things we should have done differently. And like, you have to be able. I mean, I say it to everyone on my team: if you can't handle the free feedback, you shouldn't work in marketing, right? And I think the way, I mean, look, I have an incredibly marketing supportive CEO. Like Danelle is a believer, right? Now, that said, and you guys see it in all the channels that we're, that you guys have been amazing in organizing around, like on X or on Telegram, like trying to convince, the developers that this makes sense, or that we should do this and we shouldn't do that. I mean, that is a universal truth. I mean, that used to happen in games all the time. The development team on every game I worked on had lots of free feedback on how we should market that game, right? Mm-hmm. And so like that's not unique to our space, to crypto and Web3. That is just like a universal truth. And you just have to be like, look, here's our rationale. Here's like you build the case for it. Here's what we're focused on. Here's what we're trying to do. Here's how we're going to measure it. And generally people don't disagree with that. But then they'll say, hey, can we do this also? Like, no, we can't do that now, right? And you have to build up the sort of muscle and the alignment at the, with whoever the right important stakeholders are, on being like, this is the idea of say it again, and that focus is how we're going to have impact versus ping, 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 that kind of thing. And the Crypto Saves Live campaign that Emily brought up is a really good example. So for context, for those who don't know, we launched a campaign at the at the end of last year in the fall. No, it was in the fall. We had someone in our ecosystem brought us this story. It was the wallet called Decaf. They're really active in the Solana ecosystem, and they also then built on Stellar, and particularly because of the on and off ramp thing, leveraging MoneyGram. And they brought us this story of an entrepreneur, American entrepreneur who lived in Colombia, who had a friend who, the entrepreneur lived in Colombia, and he did lots of work in this small town called San Francisco, ironically, and he was paying all of his work. Everything was done in cash, and so he would pay all these people in cash, and he would have to go to like 5 different ATMs in Medellin. And like he had like a special jacket, he'd put all this cash in, blah, 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 blah. And he was like paying people in cash. And then he got mugged and shot. And like really, and actually like his like flatlined and then came back and blah, blah, blah. And he got hooked. His friend Rick Martin is the one of the founders of Decaf, was like, hey, I got a solution that can help you. Right, you can pay people via Decaf. They can go pull cash out at MoneyGram, or they can put it in a bank account, all from the wallet. And it all happens on Stellar. But you can use blockchain can do this better, and it works, right? And so it's what people work at. People who build on Stellar, that's the case, right? Here's an example of like, it's not only has it literally saved lives in terms of now he's not walking around with bags of cash through the back roads of Colombia, but like the people, it's made significant changes in the town, right? Like people don't have to leave in order to get paid, and they don't have to, economic development in the town. And, I can do this. I don't have to leave in order to build a future for myself. I can do those things here. And so we created a piece of video content. It's a 10-minute long video. I really encourage people to watch it in terms of like, oh wow, like this is where blockchain can do something better and have real impact. And the way we rolled it out, in terms of it was obviously a core piece of our like utility blockchain meets the real world message. And we actually debuted it. We participated at Fest with the Friends with Benefits, and that was where we actually debuted the piece there. We activated at the event, but then had a panel, and Stellar people weren't on the panel. It was Decaf and someone from a company called Bitmama to talk about like, where is blockchain helping these underserved communities that have financial opportunity. And so we debuted it there. And then we had it had all the campaign legs around it that we would want. Like, this is the thing, like, as particularly in the fall when there, just like a sale of like crypto doesn't do anything. It like from a regulatory perspective, it's like, I know it does look. And so it's a story that it came from our ecosystem. We worked really closely. I mean, obviously we were attuned to wanting to tell the story for what it was, and we worked really closely with Decaf. We showed we got input on it from the entrepreneurs, a guy named Zach. We showed it to people in the town when it was done. Like, hey, does this feel right to you? Are we telling the story accurately? And so that's a really good example. Like the substance of that story had to be there then for us to be able to push it through other channels, to debut it in other places, to use it in ads to get people to come see the rest of the story, to really understand how this works. And we don't have there are moments where in the video where we can only do this on Stellar, but it is as far as it's a soft sell versus a hard sell, but it's a soft sell for Stellar. It's a hard sell for the impact that Web3 can have on how the world works. And that's really where that thing came from. And so like showing this internally at the foundation, I mean, that's one where everyone like, hey, we're going to tell this story, and here's why we're going to do it, and here's what we're going to focus on. And then you show it, and they're like, oh yeah, I get that, right? Like this is why it's why a lot of people work at SDF in the first place, and why we, build partnerships with companies like MoneyGram, and why we support companies in our ecosystem like Decaf and all that kind of stuff. Like it's like the promise realized.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you can paraphrase this like a story is worth 1,000 features. Like no one cares about the TPS or whatever outside of our small circle. And like even looking at this impact, like it's distribution and like controlling of attention, because all of these users, the first place they're going to put some money is going to be through the thing they already have, and it's probably going to be into an ecosystem that they trust. Because a lot of people, like when I'm picking a bank, I don't go for. I mean, I do a little research, but more likely than not, it's like my friend said this deal was good, so I'm probably just going to do that, and I don't switch banks very easily or very quickly. And I think that the future of crypto is going to be along these lines of like fixing stuff. And people are going to be making money in the process too, right? Because if you bring a significant proportion of the world into doing this and their capital, it's non-trivial amounts. And putting that into DeFi, I think whoever does that is going to win the long term. Because at the minute, we've got just like the same cycle of hot ball of money going around in the general ecosystem, right?
I think that's really right, Jen. And I think I think where the industry is now moved from a marketing perspective, there still is the fundamental truth of like, there's just some fundamental marketing truths that will the core, like it has to work, right? Like, does it have the features that builders need, all that? And some of that is like, it's table stakes, but it's critical. And then the other piece then is like, okay, well, who are we talking, like target understanding and talking to people, that is still a fundamental truth. Who is this for? Who am I trying to talk to? What, like, I think it doesn't, that idea of getting sort of clarity and some insight on who you're really going after, that used to be a lot more clunkier. It doesn't have to be, I did a formal quantitative research survey, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, we went in and talked to 15 developers on Discord, and here's what they said isn't working. And like that kind of getting target insight, like that is a fundamental marketing truth. And so where I feel like marketing is for the industry right now is a balance of still needing to do those things, chasing the hype, getting users is right. And hype matters, right? I don't mean to downplay that at all, but like getting kind of like some of those building blocks, some clarity and surety around those building blocks, and then throwing gas on the fire versus I'm throwing gas on the fire, we're going to see what sticks, blah, blah, blah. Like, I think the marketing in the space is maturing, is getting to the point where I feel like it's going to be great. Like just the conversations that are happening in marketing communities for Web3. You can just see the questions that people are asking, the things that people are kind of grappling with. Like those are increasingly grown up questions and grown up like approaches to like, oh, here's how we need to go do this, right? And it's awesome to see.
I know we're getting short on time. I have one more practical marketing question. So with this Crypto Saves Lives campaign, what channels and audiences did you target? How did you distribute it?
And also please say some about the KPIs and like what you measured actually.
Yeah, we pushed it via a combination of kind of organic and paid. We have a partnership with Idris Elba, who we use as a brand ambassador. And so, yeah, like throw it, like that's a great broad vehicle for us to be able to get distribution through his Twitter, although his Twitter is now off, which they swear they swear to me is not mysterious. So we have some, we did some paid around it as well. We use some KOLs around it too to just to get it out there and out of our own ecosystem. For us, it was the KPIs we cared about were obviously the video views, which I wish I had looked up the latest number before I got on. gonna plague me. So maybe I'll come back. I'll throw it in the Telegram channel. But also, we'd set up a page around that. So what kind of traffic are we getting to the page? Like, are we getting people there? Measuring, make sure, okay, how many of those views were paid versus organic? And so those were the ways that we, so it's kind of like exposure to the content is kind of how we measure something like that. And so there's not it's not one where we say, okay, well, how many developers did we get? That's not where we don't tie that together. I mean, it is a little bit more of a kind of brand play than like developer acquisition campaign. Like, how many people did we get to join the Discord as a result of it? So yeah.
I think you get lost in data too, right? When you over-index on like the direct things, you can often end up doing tactics rather than strategy. But like, it's a big challenge for us, I think, in general, as a team and a group, for making sure that the stuff we want to happen happens. Because like a lot of projects of people that are like kind of just starting out, they'll join a project that's the only thing they care about is TGE, and everything they ask is like, how is this gonna reflect our token price, or when we list or something like that. It's difficult. Again, it's storytelling, right? It's like being like, this is something that will help, but we can't measure it exactly.
Yeah, I think there are. I mean, you can measure. You can measure everything in some form, right? But I think the role of brand in something like this, in our space, it matters as as we try to create more noise and attention. And so it doesn't mean you can't measure it at all, but yeah, not every single thing is going to be like, okay, how much did this add to TGE, or how many developers did it bring in? So there's room for both.
So when we get asked that in future, we can say that Jordan told us it's okay to
right. Perfect. Yeah.
Excellent.
Well,
cool.
We're coming up to the hour. We really want to thank you, Jordan, and Jen especially, for doing all the research yet again and creating the Figma that's a wealth of knowledge, and Jordan for your time. I'm really glad you guys got connected a while ago, so we got to dive deeper in here. And thank you everyone also for joining. Jen,
thank you guys. Appreciate the time, and these conversations are great. And so hopefully I'll see who's going to Denver. All right.
Unfortunately.
We'll see you there.
We'll see you guys there.
Yes. I'll bring a space map.
Yeah. To echo what Reka said, like it's a pleasure to have you, Jordan. Great, and it was great to meet you, and like we hope to hang out again soon. And I think it's been really useful for people to see what it's like to actually run something at the highest level and the principles behind it. And then I think the last thing I'll mention is we're going to put this whole Figma, we're going to put like the reason for doing all of these streams is just so that create a public good for anyone trying to learn, anyone who's in the trenches already, trying to like, how do you communicate with your founders? How do you communicate with your audience? So we'll put it all into like a single AI that's going to be freely accessible to everyone. And then it'll be attributing you for like, Jordan said this at this date, if someone's asking about how to handle this. So that's the end goal. But yeah, amazing. Thank you very much for doing this. It's been really fun. We'll see you in Denver.
Thanks, guys.
See you.
Thank you very much. Cheers. See you later.